Welcome back. This is Unspoken, Community and Business Conversations. If you're tuning in for the first time, this is part 2, episode 2, the final episode of our Impact series where we've interviewed 10 Cleveland entrepreneurs and captured their experiences navigating systemic racism. In this final episode, we explore the wealth gap and the impact it's had on Black businesses and Black families.
Now, these are entrepreneurs who are pushing through obstacles and they are being transparent about what they've been through. And as Kristen said, systemic racism is something that people experience from the time they were born with healthcare. You experience it from your zip code. You even experience it because maybe you might have a one-income household. And this shows that, the wealth gap is real.
Very real.
So let's hear from our guests.
The wealth gap has been impacted since we landed here in 1619. You know what I'm saying? The separation of families, having to jump a broom to signify marriage versus having the full protections of what being married actually means. The welfare state, making it mandatory for men not to be in the house or you won't get access to benefits when, any type of government loan, that's literally government assistance. That's literally welfare. You know what I'm saying? And so everyone has had access to welfare, but how it's been branded for Black folks has been in service of dismantling us. The crack epidemic of the 80s did a number. The, Black men coming home from the war did a number. The AIDS epidemic did a number. And then mass incarceration also did a number on us over and over again.
The dismantling of the Black family has absolutely impacted the wealth gap because 2 incomes are better than 1. And 3 are better than 2 than 1, and so there's a lot of families, especially families that come from other countries, who come together, live in one household. All of the money is pooled into this household. So then you can invest in a business or something that will help to grow the family's economic status. We, as Black people, have not necessarily been afforded that opportunity. Generationally, our families have been broken up. From the time we left our African continent to come to the United States is when the first breaking up of families or dismantling families occurred. And so that generational cycle has plagued us in so many ways. And one of those ways is economically. And so if we put more emphasis, I believe, on the keeping together of the families, then we would see an increase in economic stability and growth for the Black community.
When you have sort of this family unit that has always been in lack or just always just been broke, anytime you get any sense of type of money, that normalcy is to be back broke. So what you do? You get that money out your hands as quick as it can because you're not used to it. And we have to begin to have those conversations around how do we begin to build that generational wealth that we weren't accustomed to growing up.
So when you go from 2 incomes to 1, obviously it would have an impact on the family. And then also not having a leader in the home, not necessarily saying the man always leads, but usually. And so a lot of times it fosters insecurities and just a cycle of negativity,
Absolutely. The dismantling of the Black family has absolutely been a significant contributor to the lack of progress that we've made as a Black community. There's lots of statistics that show that in the 60s we owned more homes then than we do now. We were making more progress financially. And so when you look at a lot of data that shows that in order to build wealth, if you have 2 incomes in a household, then that means you're not having 2 different people living separate places, paying duplicate bills. You're oftentimes have more resources that you can put to deciding to purchase a home. So now you're building equity. Oftentimes people use the equity in their home as the first place to get cash when they're starting a business. You have somebody else that maybe can help shoulder taking on the benefits while you go start a business. That's another reason a lot of people don't start businesses, is how are they going to pay for health care? So yes, absolutely, the two-person household can make a substantial difference in being able to have the additional resources necessary to start, grow, and then I would say sustain businesses. Because many of us start businesses, but if you have to take every single dollar out of the business that you make, you don't have the opportunity to reinvest, to market, and to grow. And so if there was another income in the household that was helping to shoulder some of that financial burden, it puts you in a much different position in terms of the ability to build your business.
Every Black person in the world could support every Black business that they know. That doesn't mean that we're going to have, a Black dollar store. I'm not going to have a Black dollar store in my neighborhood, a Black pharmacy, a Black grocery store. You know what I'm saying? Like, we do our best where we can. And I mean, and I think that's literally the work. That's literally the best that we can do. But supporting Black business will not decrease the wealth gap in and of itself. These are centuries upon centuries of gap that we have to fill in, and just going to a Black business is not going to be the cure all for that.
Close that gap, that wealth gap amongst Black businesses, Black communities, Black families, is for us to really sit down and have those hard conversations of how do we begin to support each other, how do we begin to empower each other, and really create this network of, all of us can do this together. I don't care if there's 2 restaurants that sell the same thing, you both can flourish. It's not a competition. And I think sometimes we get stuck in this, that there's only, we've been conditioned to say that there can only be one.
My solution for closing the wealth gap would be education, financial literacy, understanding the power of investing, not spending every dollar every time you get paid on the mall, saving, having a budget, talking to people. I think in our culture, we believe it's negativity and like asking for help or asking for advice or teach me how you did that. People ask me all the time, and I ask all my other people that are successful, how'd you do that? What did you do? And that's how I'm able to grow, build, and learn. But if you Mr. Know-it-all and you don't think you have room to grow, you're gonna stay stationary. So I think as a culture, we need to work on starting with our kids. So get them debit cards, teach them how to build. I had to do it with my daughters. I knew very early on I had to put them on my credit card to build their credit young. So by the time they got to college, they already had good credit, because mom let them piggyback off hers to make sure that they were not under, or behind the curve.
I think the way that we break into fields of expertise that we have not been exposed to is by making a commitment as a collective community that will introduce our kids to new things. I have 2 sons. They're 17 and soon to be 16. And my youngest son was fascinated with swords and knives and guns, right? And like most little boys are. And so I happened to live in Shaker Heights, and I looked in the Park and Recs books, and they had fencing as a thing that he could do as a, after school activity on Saturday morning. So we got up and he went to the basement of the high school and he got to use a sword. And he was excited about that because he got to learn something new. He's not doing anything with fencing now, but what it did for him is create a level of curiosity and an expectation that if he had an idea, there was a way for him to go try and to act that out. And so I think as parents, oftentimes we're looking for, the best school. I got to pay for this private school. I got to do this. I got to sign up for that program. Listen to their curiosity and find ways to pique their interest, because then it demonstrates to them that I don't have one simple narrow path that I can take. I can try all these different things. And I think as adults, we have to be willing to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations. I go into lots of rooms where I have no idea, but when somebody invites me, I'll take a moment, I'll listen to a podcast, I'll read a couple of articles, so I know a few words about what's going on in the room when I get in there, and then commit myself to learning some more.
It's all about education. I mean, because, you can't do something that you don't know. So, and when it comes to, obviously food, African Americans, we know how to cook. So a lot of folks are jumping to the business, you know, so because people always ask, oh, Paul, why would you open up a nightclub? That's so cliche. I mean, I opened up a nightclub to make some money. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not about, you know, and there's a whole lot of white people that own restaurants, and a whole lot of white people do fitness stuff. Like, you know what I mean? So it's not like we're the only ones doing it. You know what I'm saying? We're not doing it at the scale that they're doing it. They own way more restaurants than we own, way more fitness things than we own. You know what I mean? So it's like, whatever business you can get in, I think you need to get in. You know, so if you want to be a tech guy, you're gonna obviously have to know something about tech or know somebody in tech. You know, so and a lot of businesses are hard to start. Like the wine business, that was just a hard business to start. But since I was in the liquor business for so long, obviously I knew a lot of people, and I was able to get that brand going. But getting it into the stores and all that type of stuff, that's the part that people don't understand. You know what I mean? Because it's like, now you're dealing with a whole nother type of beast, right? Because you're not dealing with white people. Now you're dealing with foreigners. The majority of liquor stores, convenience stores, like I don't have I would say, a liquor account outside of like bars and stuff. But like the liquor stores, convenience stores, and all those other stores that I'm in, those are all foreigners. So that's a whole different battle. But the one thing I will say is that it's easier to deal with minority on minority because the judgment, it's like there's no judgment there. Because you're a foreigner, I'm a foreigner to a certain extent, and we're able to talk more and do different things.
Those of us who have been exposed have the responsibility to expose others like us. And a lot of times that's not a thing that we want to necessarily take on, but we have to. It's imperative. And so even with my staff, I had the opportunity to work in these different sectors that exposed me to philanthropy, wealth building, economics, all of these different industries and tech companies and all of these things. And so one of my charges as the leader of the organization is to be able to encourage my staff to go out to these meetings and to learn more. So instead of me going, which is who everyone expects to show up, I send someone else in place of me so that they learn these things, because I know all about this already. I've already had this experience. I've had the experience of sitting at these tables and being one of the few Black faces in these spaces. And so I don't need any more of that experience. I have enough of that to last me for a lifetime. But what I can do is lend that experience to the people who have entrusted me with their livelihoods. And so we have to do more of that.
We're in every single industry. Some of these industries could not exist without us. You know, like the work that happened at NASA was built on the backs of Black computers who were Black women, mathematicians, math geniuses. They could not have put a man in orbit and put a man on the moon without Black women.
I agree with so many of the ladies here. I mean, just the degree to which our families have suffered generation after generation never seems to amaze me. And, you know, we're so far removed, like, you know, you and I, our peers, our generation, we're so far removed from Jim Crow and the civil rights days that, you know, to some extent, I don't think we have even realized just how far we're behind. And, you know, it never seems to amaze me either how white people just think that we are supposed to be able to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps. And many of them really, truly believe that we have the same opportunities as they do. I'll never forget having a conversation with a pretty prominent attorney here in Cleveland. He's pretty well known for actually calling out many of the organizations and politicians here for Cleveland failing. And I can remember having a conversation with him and speaking about some of the challenges I've personally faced. And I can remember him saying, like, that's no excuse. I grew up poor in Youngstown. And while I agreed with him to some extent, because I don't believe that where you're from should dictate, you know, what you're capable of. I feel like you should always strive for excellence. It's absolutely no excuse. But I was really baffled at how he believed that his plight as a white male could be anywhere near comparable to mine as a black woman. You know, he could go to school, get a degree, put on a suit, get a nice haircut, and walk into any room, and nobody's going to assume that he's poor, that he's from a rough neighborhood. But I, as a black woman, no matter how good my resume is, no matter how sharp I look, what they see first is a black woman. And it is automatically assumed that I am poor, that I'm not as smart, that I'm not as competent, that I'm too angry or emotional.
I don't know what to make of the white ally movement. I can't necessarily trust it either, because history shows that I should be very wary of that. And that's not to say that I don't put people in a collective box either. You know, there are some very well-meaning, well-intentioned white people. They're usually Democrats, usually liberals, you know, and sometimes that shows up more problematic than it is helpful, to be honest. For me, one of those ways that it becomes problematic is that I get bombarded with those type of emails that's asking, what can I do as a white person? Or we should partner with you all so that you can help us be better white people. And for me, I can't put my attention and focus on that, because that isn't my problem. What's my problem is what's facing my people. And since I know my people very well, that is who I'm focused on assisting, uplifting, and empowering.
Just leave us alone. Because so often when they try to help us, things just get worse for us, because they lack those things that I talked about earlier. You know, they lack a race analysis. They have a rosy historical recollection. They don't want to be uncomfortable. They want quick solutions. They want to get the icky off as quickly as possible. They're not proximate, right? Like, all those things make for a recipe for disaster if you're trying to help someone, if you're trying to be in solidarity with someone. White is norm and everything else is other. When we come in contact with American systems, our outcomes get worse because the systems weren't designed for us. They were designed for the norm, not for the other. And until white folks can get to a sense of understanding belonging for everybody, then they are trying to apply normal solutions to other. And that doesn't work, in my opinion.
I tell them to have impact in the spaces that they occupy. It's great to put out statements. It's great to send me a text message. But if you have the ability to hire and fire, when is the last time you interviewed a person of color? If you have the ability to control a P&L, when's the last time you spent money with a person of color? Because it does me no good to hear about what you care about if you're not living it in the spaces that you occupy and control. If you are a teacher in a classroom, how do you treat the students of color? Do you ask them how they're doing today? When they're having an off day, do you assume they're bad, or do you assume that maybe there's something underlying that's going on? If you're in city council, wherever you are, I just want white people to understand that it's really impactful to check on us as individuals, but it's much more important that when I'm not in the room, that you know the things that I would likely say, and you say them because they mean that much to you as well.
I think firstly, listening, not being, because a lot of times white folks want to play the hero and pat themselves on the back. Oh, are we good now? Like, I gave you a job, or I gave you this sizable donation, or I gave you this grant. Are we good now? And it's like, again, I go back to what I said earlier about feeling and really feeling what we're saying. And then calling out the bullshit. Like, if you see something, say something. Really say it. Like, call it out. Because it's one thing to say that you for us. It's a whole nother thing to stand up for us. Like around the time the George Floyd thing happened, I had white people like calling me and apologizing and saying like, oh my God, I feel so bad and all this. And it's like, well, I'm glad you finally see. We've been telling you this for like 400 years, like that we're black and people are killing us because we're black. In order to really be for us authentically, then you need to start calling that shit out. Like, even if it ain't no black people around, especially when it's no black people around, if you hear some white folks saying some nasty racist shit, you need to call them out on it. Are you part of the problem? And then support black business. Like the chit chat and the signs and I live in Shaker. It's like 1 million Black Lives Matter signs. What the fuck are you doing for our community? Are you supporting black businesses? Are you teaching your kids that racism is a disease? Or is it just, again, the same as saying Black Lives Matter, a trend? Is it a trend for you? Or is it a way of life?
It would start at home and not teaching your kids that they're above somebody else based on their skin color. And then I would tell them to speak, have a voice. Don't just talk about it, be about it. So if you see somebody doing something that's racially motivated, or if you see somebody saying something that's racist, step up and speak up and say something. Educate yourselves. Understand that we have been through something.
If you can't talk to your crazy uncle at the Thanksgiving dinner table, you can't be in my army to do anything, right? Because that's your uncle, right? This is theoretically somebody that you love and that loves you. And so you have no ability to help me in any way if you can't talk to your uncle, or you can't talk to your neighbor, or you can't talk to your spouse. If white folks see black folks' liberation as a thing for black folks only, you can't help me. Because I think if white folks do not reckon with the way that racism and white supremacy is eroding their souls as well, right? And demoralizing them as people as well, you can't do anything for me. And I think that's across the board on anything. If I am trying to do a thing that only benefits you, you shouldn't trust me. Because if I can't articulate what's in it for me, don't trust me, right? Because that's not the way I think humanity works. We always want something.
I would think they would first need to educate their white peers
Okay.
first.
Build by number.
They need to demolish that mindset first of all. I mean,
If they could.
And just speak out. I mean, and there are times, even as black people, we've had to speak out. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when we in public, we're like, stop saying nigga.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same. And I would think that white people need to educate, like, their white peers, like, they're not all ghetto.
Right.
You know, stop
Right.
thinking that. You
Right.
know, they're educated.
Right.
So I think they would first need to educate their peers first, and then as well as support us.
Okay.
Because, I mean, unfortunately, one white client walking in is not gone.
Even though that one white client walking in, getting great customer service, getting a great product, taking it back to their community and showing them
True.
could also be a great example, not just verbally, but materialistically as well.
Yeah, true. That's true. Very true.
Be in a position to where you're open to learning and you're eager for growth, and then you're also persistent. You know, look at me trying to grow this beard. This is persistence. So it's being able to have that patience, that dedication, and really being able to say, okay, this is what I can do, not just for myself, but this is what I can do for my family, my friends. We have to bring each other along with us.
So the one thing I'd like to leave everyone with is, don't let anyone else ever tell you who you are. You determine and dictate who you are. And before seeking out the acceptance of others, regardless of your background, sexual orientation, age, class, whatever, you have to fully accept who you are. self-love.
We have to give each other much more grace, and we have to be unafraid to partner and to collaborate and to call out when something doesn't go right so we can get better.
Think how far we could go if we're able to bring each other along with us. And so that's one message that I would like to leave, is be open to learning, eager for growth, having that persistence, and just having that mindset that this is bigger than you and this is for all of us. Like Issa Rae said, I'm rooting for everybody Black. So if we're truly going to say that and agree with her, like, let's do it.
Don't limit yourself and seek out mentors in the field that you're aspiring to be in. So don't just say, well, I don't have it in my DNA or I don't have it in my family to go out and be an entrepreneur. So be the first one and go find somebody, find the least likely person that you think wouldn't help you. They just might help you. Or even if they shut the door and say no, if you hear no 3 to 7 to 10 times, don't let that stop you. An entrepreneur doesn't stop. They keep going and going, and they look at every challenge as an obstacle to peak at that mountaintop and then reach down to the next person to reach them up. So the cycle can keep going and going and going.
Us being in charge of our own dollars and recycling Black dollars within our communities will be our saving grace. And whatever somebody else give us is extra.
We are part of a diaspora. And on the continent, the people who are the economists are us, the chemists are us, the engineers are us, the agriculturalists are us. So we don't have to believe that we can't have those roles simply because we're in the United States. We are experts in all of these industries. We just have to dedicate ourselves to doing it, and we can thrive, and we don't have to be limited or relegated to any one type of business.
Build a strong team. Build a team. Don't go in there doing it by yourself. Build a team. The team will help you grow the money, and once you get the funds, expand, and take the business national to international. Like, that's exactly what you want to do, But I'm telling you, build a team. That's the number one thing. Because it's very hard to run a business or to even grow a business without a team.
We have to put our money together. We're never going to grow if we don't put our money together. We have to get past it. Like, Atlanta is very deliberate. They don't have to like you. You don't have to like me. They put their money in and they go their own separate ways. We have to invest in our own stuff and stop putting our money in other people's pockets, period.
Dream big. I mean, and like my sister said, be educated in what you're going to do. Make a field of friends, because you get so much more with friends and foes. There are going to be some out there, but don't burn bridges.
Yeah. Work your network.
Yeah. And I think we could do it together. I think each day we can be better, be stronger. Because we're a great people. I mean, like we said, we built this country on our back.
Yeah.
We are a great people. We are so gifted. And stop letting people use you. Your gift is inside of you. Work it.
So I have 2 messages. The first is for non-Black people. When you hear Black Lives Matter, does it offend you? If it does, I'd like you to think back and reflect on why Black people having equality and equity actually affects you or worries you or even angers you. Confucius said, to know what is right and not to do it is the worst cowardice. Please think about that. And to my brothers and sisters, I'd like you to know that this is 2020, and this is the first time I'd say that we'd have this much freedom and this much information to access. Be patient with each other and help each other grow. We have a long fight ahead of us.
Man, spot on, Kofi, spot on. And my message to entrepreneurs is that if you have a vision, give it 100% and never, ever, ever give up. Also, get into business for the right reasons. And for those that don't identify as being cut out for entrepreneurship, be willing to work for a small business owner. You never know. Your dream job may just be with a Fortune 500 company in the making. Once again, we'd like to thank Ingenuity Cleveland for giving us the Impact Award, which helped to produce this show. We'd also like to thank our guests for their participation and for sharing their personal and professional stories. We encourage you to support their businesses. You can find their Instagram pages in the credits after this show. We'd also like to thank each and every person that gave any feedback, advice, or help to make this all happen. This has been an amazing ride and officially concludes our Impact series. Thank you all so much for watching. This is Unspoken.